How FA Cup replay will affect Blank Gameweek 29 in fantasy. The FA Cup replay has caused quite a stir in the world of Fantasy Premier League, as it has disrupted the plans of many FPL managers ahead of the Blank Gameweek 29. The FA Cup replay between Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur, which was originally scheduled for this weekend, has been rescheduled for next week. This has left FPL managers in a dilemma, as they now have to reconsider their transfer and captaincy plans for the upcoming Blank Gameweek. The FA Cup replay between Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur was initially scheduled to take place on the same weekend as the Blank Gameweek 29, which would have meant that both teams would have been without a fixture in the FPL. However, the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay to next week means that both teams will now have a fixture in Game Week 29, which has thrown a spanner in the works for many FPL managers. One of the main concerns for FPL managers is the impact that the FA Cup replay will have on their transfer plans. Many managers had already made transfers in anticipation of the Blank Gameweek, bringing in players from teams that were not involved in the FA Cup replay. However, with the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay, these transfers may now need to be reconsidered, as players from Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur are now back in contention for selection. Furthermore, the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay has also affected FPL managers' captaincy plans for Game Week 29. Many managers had planned to captain players from teams that were not involved in the FA Cup replay, but with the rescheduling of the replay, they now have to reconsider their options. Players from Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur are now back in the running for the captain's armband, which has added an extra layer of complexity to an already challenging Blank Gameweek. The rescheduling of the FA Cup replay has also raised questions about the fairness of the FPL rules and regulations. Many FPL managers feel that the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay has given an unfair advantage to those who had not yet made their transfers for Game Week 29. These managers now have the opportunity to bring in players from Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur, whereas those who had already made their transfers may have to reconsider their plans and potentially take point hits to rectify their teams. On the other hand, some FPL managers see the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay as an opportunity to gain an advantage over their rivals. By bringing in players from Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur, they can capitalize on the extra fixture and potentially gain an edge in the overall FPL rankings. However, this strategy comes with its own risks, as it may require taking hits and sacrificing valuable players from other teams. Overall, the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay has added a new layer of complexity to an already challenging Blank Gameweek. FPL managers now have to reconsider their transfer and captaincy plans, and some may have to take point hits to rectify their teams. The rescheduling has also raised questions about the fairness of the FPL rules and regulations, with some managers feeling that it has given an unfair advantage to those who had not yet made their transfers. However, for others, it presents an opportunity to gain an advantage over their rivals. It remains to be seen how the rescheduling of the FA Cup replay will ultimately affect the outcome of Game Week 29 in Fantasy Premier League.